Everyone knows Ohio State football fans are not happy right now. This past year, they ended up missing out on the college football playoff and have now lost to the Michigan Wolverines for 3 straight years. While they did have a commanding streak for quite some time, Ohio State fans were pretty much ready to throw everyone under the bus. They were ready to get rid of Ryan Day, they were ready to get a new quarterback, and some wanted to get a whole new team. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the fans were mad and the administration listened. They went out and hired Chip Kelly, brought back a ton of talented players from last year's team, and then went out and apparently spent $13 million in the portal to upgrade their roster. Honestly, I totally agree with Ohio State doing this, and in today's video, we're going to talk about Ohio State's $13 million portal class. We're going to go through all their new additions, talk about who they are, and how they could help them achieve their ultimate goal of making it back to the college football playoff and winning a national championship. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about Ohio State's transfer portal class. Okay, so the first guy we need to talk about who Ohio State added in the portal is Will Kacmarek. He's a grad senior tight end from Ohio University. He originally signed with the Bobcats coming out of St. Louis, Missouri, and he was a 2-star defensive lineman before moving to the offensive side of the ball to play tight end. Through 27 total games in the MAC, Will caught 52 passes for 507 yards and 2 touchdowns. He probably won't have that much of an impact with Ohio State this year, considering G. Scott Jr. is in front of him, but he'll probably be a solid depth piece. It also means he probably didn't command much of that NIL price tag either, but he is an addition nonetheless that could be important. Now we start getting into bigger time players, and the first one we need to talk about is Keenan Nelson Jr. He's a former 4-star defensive back from the state of South Carolina and was the number 17 safety in the class of 2022. He'll be considered a redshirt sophomore at Ohio State, and in 15 games at the South Carolina Gamecocks, he had 13 tackles and 1 pass deflection, with also a blocked punt for a touchdown. He wasn't even a starter for South Carolina except in 4 games, though he did start at the nickel position for their Gator Bowl game against Notre Dame. It's not likely that Keenan will also see the field that much for Ohio State, especially at the safety position, considering they have both Lathan Ransom and Alabama transfer Caleb Downs there. Those 2 guys are definitely the entrenched starters, and he might not even be 4th in that safety room, as Malik Hartford might be in front of him. He'll probably have to make an impact on special teams, but he is a good depth piece and does have some potential for the future. He's also another example of a player who probably didn't take much of that $13 million chunk. Now we get to another big-time player, and that is Seth McLaughlin. He spent 3 years as the starting center for Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide, and originally he was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school in Georgia. He worked his way into being a starting center for the Tide after his sophomore year, and in total started 22 games for Bama. This included all 14 of last year's games, and after the season was over, he entered the transfer portal. He definitely had some struggles in that last game, as many blame him for that botched snap to Jalen Milroe. He was considered one of the better linemen in the portal, and he will either take over for Carson Hinsman, or he'll end up sliding over to the guard spot where Matt Jones was. While he did have some trouble with snaps over the last few games, he should be a consistent player on that offensive line pretty much no matter where he plays. He likely got a bigger chunk of that NIL money, but nothing compared to the next few players. The 4th guy we need to talk about is quarterback Julian Sayin. Ohio State is in an interesting spot with the position, as they brought in Will Howard to be the starter, and then they have 3 depth pieces. They have redshirt freshman Lincoln Kienholz, redshirt sophomore Devin Brown, and true freshman Aaron Noland. I'm not quite sure what the future holds for both Brown and Kienholz, but Aaron Noland and Julian Sayin are definitely going to be the next guys up. Sayin was a huge deal, as while he was in Carlsbad High School in California, he finished with over 8,000 career passing yards and 86 touchdowns. He also only had 4 picks, and he earned himself a 5-star rating. He actually enrolled early at Bama in 2023. He actually was part of the class of 2024 and would decide to enroll early at Bama before Nick Saban would retire and Kalen DeBoer would take over, and he entered the portal. Again, I think the idea of early enrollees being transfers is stupid, but he does count into the portal, and he's now headed over to Ohio State. He's obviously in the running for the starting job, but I don't think it's actually very likely. More than likely, I think he'll pull a Quinn Ewers and completely redshirt and not play at all this year. I mean, there's no reason for him to be number 2 on the depth chart unless he is that talented. Lincoln and Devin are probably going to be the backups, and Will Howard will be the starter, but he is an extremely talented player. It's going to be interesting to see how things happen afterwards with Aaron Noland, but I'm sure Ohio State paid a decent amount in NIL for him, given the fact that he could be a future star. The next 3 players are where everything gets crazy. The first dude we need to talk about is Quinshon Judkins. He was one of the SEC's most talented running backs over the last 2 years, and he spent time at Ole Miss. Originally, he was only a 3-star recruit, but had the offer sheet of a 4-star player. He ended up choosing Ole Miss and immediately got playing time as a true freshman under Lane Kiffin. He ended up exploding onto the scene as he finished with 1,567 yards and 16 touchdowns. He set the Ole Miss school record and followed that up in 2023 with nearly 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns once again. He won the Connerly Trophy and was named the SEC Freshman of the Year in 2022, and then was a two-time All-SEC offensive pick. But after the year was over, he announced he'd be hitting the transfer portal and ended up at Ohio State. He's already in a running back room that includes Travion Henderson, so it'll be interesting to see how Ohio State and their new offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, will balance the two of them. Given how good he was at Ole Miss, it's fair to say him and Travion will be spectacular, and they will be the most dominant 1-2 punch of running backs in the country. Quinshon, in my opinion, is a top 3 back in college football, and I bet he got a nice slice of NIL money to come to Ohio State. Ohio State needed a new quarterback after Kyle McCord entered the portal, and they ended up getting Will Howard instead of Cam Ward. Will Howard spent 4 years as a quarterback at Kansas State after he was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school. He ended up leading them to a Big 12 championship in 2022, but before that, he came off the bench for Skylar Thompson and Adrian Martinez. He ended up throwing 8 touchdowns and 10 interceptions in 2020, and then threw 21 touchdowns and 8 interceptions as a starter at K-State. The fan base went from hating him to loving him, especially in 2022, where he stepped in for Martinez once he threw for 15 touchdowns and 4 picks in just 7 games and led K-State to that championship appearance. But things were at an interesting crossroads. Kansas State sort of wanted to go in for their superstar redshirt freshman Avery Johnson, and Will Howard decided it was time to move on. While there was some speculation he'd go to USC, he would end up at Ohio State. I think more than likely he's going to be the starter for the Buckeyes this season, as he's a capable runner, has a ton of experience, and is trying to improve himself into an NFL draft spot. A good pocket passer with good mobility, so he should be pretty solid for Chip Kelly's scheme. As a proven starting quarterback, he probably demanded the most NIL money Ohio State had, and hopefully he lives up to the hype and isn't a wasted check. The final guy we need to talk about is Caleb Downs. He was arguably the best player in the transfer portal and was one of the best defensive backs in college football in 2023. He ended up committing to play for Bama under Coach Saban and was a 5-star recruit and the brother of Colts wide receiver Josh Downs. He's also actually the nephew of former NFL corner Dre Bly, and the NFL just runs in his family. He made an instant impact at Alabama as a true freshman, logging 70 tackles, 3.5 TFLs, 2 picks, and 3 pass breakups. He was named the SEC Freshman of the Year last season, and after Nick Saban announced his retirement, he also hit the transfer portal and ended up at Ohio State. He decided to join his teammate Julian Sayin, and he'll probably start immediately at safety, and he'll become one of the better safeties in the country. He should help Ohio State's defense in the passing game, and if he plays like he did at Bama, he'll probably be one of the top defensive players in the country. Considering his pedigree at Bama and his status as a former 5-star, he probably required a ton of NIL money. My guess is he probably collected the second most amount of money behind Howard, but who knows? He really was a huge deal, and he's one of the longer leashes of any player in the portal. But how do all these players add to Ohio State's ultimate goal of winning a championship? They really complement the roster, and it really works out well for them. This transfer class is pretty much perfect, as Ohio State needed a bridge quarterback after losing Kyle McCord, and they didn't get enough out of Devin Brown or Lincoln Kienholz to really think either of those guys were the guy. They got their guy in Will Howard to be the dude now, and then they got their guy Julian Sayin to be the guy of the future. Sorry I'm saying guys so much. They had one of the best running backs in college football in Quinshon Judkins, as the NFL typically has 2 running backs per team, so why not have 2 of the top 5 guys in college football if you're Ohio State? They also signed a good interior offensive lineman, a safety who paired alongside Lathan Ransom makes the best safety duo in the country, and then got a couple of depth pieces in case tragedy strikes. I'm really impressed with Ohio State and what they have coming back on defense, as they already bring back Jordan Hancock, Tyleik Williams, Joey Tuamaloa, Denzel Burke, and Jack Sawyer. Obviously there are a couple more names there as well, but throwing in Caleb Downs, and all of a sudden this defense is scary, and this is one of the best defensive units Ohio State has had in a long time. On paper, this is a very talented football team. They have a good coaching staff with Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, and it's apparent they are going all in for a national championship. We've seen that adding impact transfers, especially at the skill positions like QB, running back, and wide receiver, can have a really big impact and success in college football. Texas and Washington made the playoff based largely on players that transferred into the program, but they didn't even have a transfer class as loaded or as expensive as this one. There's always going to be a threat of the dream team falling apart, but I think Ohio State got guys who are going to compete and are going to contribute. Maybe they do win a national championship. I think they'll be good enough to win the Big Ten, beat Michigan, and at least make a deep run. But again, what do I know? If you're an Ohio State fan, what do you think of your upcoming 2024 season? Who do you think the best player on the team is? And what do you think of this portal haul? Be sure to let me know down below. Let me know if I should cover another team's portal class, and before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.